there's like still like a complete disconnect between like your like true data scientists, right? And like business and organizations that we have to like start bridging the gap between, right? Like I would say traditionally, like, you know, with my experience, we've brought in like PhD data scientists, super smart, right? And like very like theoretical, and everything they're saying makes sense. But like when you turn it into like practicality or like value for the organization, like there was a disconnect, right? Like it was like, yeah, that thing sounds cool. Like what does that really mean for like us in the organization?
Yeah, I think it goes, in my experience, it goes both ways, where the data scientists just, they want to be experts in what they're experts in, right? And they want to communicate the things that they're supposed to be rigorous about. And the business says, you're not speaking my language. Well, you know, also the business isn't speaking the data scientist language. And so you have to work hard to find common ground. Like the business really has to communicate, like, this is why this is important. And that's, you know, but again, back in the days where you could do feature engineering and that was a thing, it was easier to connect to, okay, here's the language you're speaking, here's what we should then care about in the data. We have to find, both sides have to work hard to find that common ground and impress upon each other why the things they're saying are important.
I think this is a really interesting lead into machine teaching, actually, because I think this is, I think one of the other, you know, maybe slight interesting observations here is that for how common sort of AI and data science are now kind of globally, I think one thing that we don't necessarily recognize as much is that it's a really big shift from academia into industry. Right. I think that maybe while the overall volume, I mean, I'm sure the overall volume has changed, but not as dramatically as the volume has shifted from academia into industry. And I think that, you know, and maybe the other thread other than machine teaching to think about here is purely talent. I think that everyone has sort of gotten their heads around the notion that data science and ML can be useful and valuable, and that these skills, like there is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And I think people have shown enough examples of that they get that now, but they don't necessarily understand how hard it is to get there. And I think, you know, understanding that as much as anything, I think the competitive differentiation of, you know, the Googles and the Facebooks is that they have been able to let their researchers do research in a way that actually turns into productive returns for the organization without encumbering them. And like, not everyone can afford to spend, you know, whatever $4 billion to set up a whole business unit, right? That then does that. But I think it's something that people really don't pay a lot of attention to, is that, you know, the PhDs have a massive amount of decision-making power in exactly how they are going to be working and how they want to be working. I mean,
Yeah.
as the executives
I
do as
would
well.
say traditionally, like what I saw on the consulting side, right, is like organizations will bring on like PhDs, like super smart, like very passionate about like research, but what ends up happening is they're like basically manually like cleansing data. So they become this like glorified like data administrator, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And then like you don't really get like the differentiation or like the products like you would have expected like from the data that they're really cleansing, right? Because they don't have time to do it.
Leading effective research teams is really hard, and most people aren't good at managing, period. But then managing like truly brilliant creative people like that, those people are exceptional, and maybe there aren't more than 10 of them in the world.
And like I think people really underestimate the kind of infrastructure you need to put up to support these folks. Like I can't tell you how many times I think you see this format of just hire the data scientists, put them in a corner, ask them to make value.
And
right?
magic will come out. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Where, you know, what I actually tell the companies that I advise, right, is that a researcher should absolutely not be your first hire, right? When you're subscale, like you've got to get your data strategy in place first. You've got to get your ops strategy in place first, right? Unless you've got that, you know, a researcher is going to be piddling away on their desktop and probably not very efficiently. And you're both going to be frustrated by it.